Hey everybody, Andy from Tennis Euphoria bringing you a review of two Dunlop rackets, the CX 400 Tour and the CX 200. The CX line of rackets within Dunlop's tennis racket family are their control orientated rackets. There's a few different iterations now. I have reviewed the 200 Tours if you want to check out that video. The CX 400 Tour is a relatively new addition to the lineup, but that aside, these aren't new releases or anything. They've been around a little while. I just wanted to make a video as I've been reminded of them recently. They fitted the bill for some custom consultation matching services that I ran, and it reminded me how well they play. The CX 400 Tour is 100 square inches, 300 grams, 23mm beam, 16x19 pattern of course. The CX 200 is a 98 square inch, 305 gram target, 21.5mm beam, 16x19 pattern. In terms of a bit of quality control checking that I always look to try and do, my CX 400 Tour was a touch overweight. That actually wasn't a bad thing at all. If I had one in stock, I probably would take the weight up a little anyway. I've got a friend who plays with the CX 400 Tour. I asked to borrow his for a few days alongside mine, restring it for free. He obliged. His was also both overweight, interestingly. My CX 200 was pretty much on spec, about a gram over. You're not going to complain about that. And let's consider then where they sit and how they play. Starting with the CX 200, well, with those specs, it's pretty clear where this is targeted. It's very much competing, I suppose, with the main player being the Blade 98. How I would compare this to the Blade 98 is obviously similar characteristics. It does also have lovely feel, great control. It's a little bit more sort of plush in its feeling compared to the Blade, but with the Blade, particularly the V8, you have that quite unique combination of plushness and solidity, and this doesn't feel like it packs quite the punch of the Blade. A little bit underpowered. It's got a very buttery 64 RA unstrung, and I think this racket is all about feel. In terms of comparing it to the CX 200 Tours, well, it's got a higher launch angle than the 18x20, but when it comes to comparing it to the 95 square inch 16x19 CX 200 Tour, then the CX 200 Tour has a more rounded head shape. For people like myself who connect most of the time towards the sort of middle bottom of the string bed, then actually that rounded head straight is quite optimized for that hitting, that sweet spot I'll find quite regularly. So this has a bit more of a kind of pure strikey style to the string bed and the frame shape. So I didn't notice a massive difference, to be honest, in terms of forgiveness and sweet spot compared to the CX 200 Tour. And given that it isn't a massive jump up in power, then I personally would struggle to pick between the two. With regards to the CX 400 Tour, then you do have some big differences. First of all, in RA, this is a bit stiffer, 67 unstrung. You have that 23mm beam, and of course you have that 100 square inch head size. Quite different. You'd be tempted with the specs on this to consider it along the lines of, you know, your pure drives, even things like, you know, spin orientated rackets like your extremes. This very much is, I suppose, representative of the evolution of tweener rackets, and it should be considered alongside, I guess, a category that I think's getting a lot of traction and is developing. That category being that kind of speed like category. So you have lots of rackets in this space that are increasingly popular. You obviously have that Blade V8 100 that you would compare to this, that I reviewed very favourably recently. You also have the Prince ATS Techstream Tours, both of those 100 square inches with the open and the 100p with the closed frame. It's sort of not too far from this. You obviously have the speeds themselves, both the Pro and the MP could compare. This would probably sit somewhere in between in some respects. And then I suppose you have things like the Gravity MP increasingly, that this sort of category seems to be carving itself out within that sort of tweener world. I think within that's where this CX 400 Tour is really strong, because you do have that little bit more power, where both of the rackets excel is in feel. So whilst the CX 400 Tour is a little bit stiffer, you still have really nice sort of buttery flexy feel with the CX 400 Tour. I was actually quite surprised that it was a 67 RA. I would have guessed at 65. So that's a real compliment to it. But you do have more power, not as much power as you would get from perhaps a Pure Drive, for example, but equal power to a Speed MP, in my opinion, and equal power compared to the Blade V8 and 100 V8, and it should be demoed alongside those two. I actually prefer it to the Speed MP very much. I think this is a fantastic racket. Do they have any weaknesses? Well, they both share one weakness for me, but it's something that you can fix. So they have quite a dense string pattern. The 16x19 is dense in the middle, and that's not a bad thing. We've even seen things like the Extreme MP densen up and tighten up the middle of their patterns with good positive effects. So you do get great control from the string bed. I think unless you get the strings right, then you don't really get lots of spin potential, and you get a low launch angle with both of these, but it is easily fixed. So for the last 2 weeks, I deliberately tried to go on that journey to find really good string setups for these frames. I started with Babolat RPM Soft, fairly powerful, obviously very soft to go one extreme end. I had a very soft setup, very comfortable setup. It felt lovely, but it did lack that snap back in the string, and not a lot of spacing between that string pattern meant I was lacking launch and spin. So I moved to Babolat RPM Power. That really improved the spin and the launch, and I quite enjoyed that. Find myself going up in tension a little bit there, 53, 54 pounds, and that was working really, really well. I usually sit at about 50 pounds. Then I started playing around with hybrids, and I found one that I thought was fantastic and would stick with if these were my frames, and that was Luxolon Savage in black in the mains at 52 pounds, and then I was going with Headlinks Touch in the crosses, again at 52 pounds. And I thought that combination worked really, really well in these rackets. The Savage gives you nice spin potential, good launch, fairly durable as well, but still controlled. And then Headlinks Touch is a string I actually quite like, quite soft feeling. You do get good touch, but I find it to be relatively powerful. So I think that combination of that spin generation and overall power whilst maintaining the touch from those strings is the way to go with this. So I would highly recommend that CX 400 Tour, particularly if you're looking for control, touch and feel that blends the old world with some more power and forgiveness. I also would encourage people looking at the Speed and the Blade 100 V8 to look at it side by side. The CX 200, a little bit underpowered. I think the biggest challenge might be that the Blade 98 is obviously so good with its unique feel that many might go for that over this, but if you're a bit price sensitive or you're happy to put some lead on a frame, then the CX200 is a really good cheaper option, and it shouldn't be ignored. If you want to try and get hold of these rackets, it's hard at the moment, but use code Tennis Euphoria, all things tennis, for a discount. Hope they enjoyed it. Please subscribe and like to the channel, as it will help me to make some more. Thanks for watching.